The plasma guns had been quiet for exactly 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Marcus Kane thought it might be safe to come out from behind the broken medical truck. But on Kepler's edge, might be safe was all you ever got. The difference between living and dying often came down to one thing. Could you guess how long it took Vareth soldiers to reload their energy guns? Or would they prefer to fight up close with knives and swords? The field hospital Marcus had run for 6 months was now a pile of smoking metal and broken medical tools. The cheap buildings had been built by whoever charged the least money. They broke apart as easily as anyone would expect when hit by military weapons. Marcus picked up his emergency medical bag and started walking through the wreckage. He followed the same rules that had kept him alive for 2 years of treating hurt soldiers in a war zone. Find the wounded people. Help who you can. Try not to think too much about the politics that caused their injuries. Medic. The voice came from somewhere in the ruins of the surgery room. The person spoke standard galactic language, but with the special sound patterns that meant they were Vareth. Marcus stopped walking. He thought quickly about the risks. He had learned that waiting too long got patients killed faster than enemy fire. The Vareth rebellion had been going on across Kepler's edge for 3 years. It started when human settlers found out that the planet's valuable minerals were right under places the Vareth considered sacred burial grounds. The fighting had turned into the worst kind of guerrilla war. It made every medical center a possible target. Every act of helping people could be called a war crime, depending on which side was asking. Marcus followed the voice through debris that made crunching sounds under his boots. It was the sound of expensive medical equipment being turned into scrap metal. He found where the voice came from behind a collapsed wall. The wall used to separate the emergency surgery room from the recovery area. A Vareth child lay there, no more than 12 years old by human standards. A fallen support beam had trapped her underneath. She had clear internal injuries and was losing blood fast. She needed help right away, or she would die soon. Easy there, Marcus said softly. He knelt beside the hurt child while his scanner started checking her injuries automatically. I'm a medic. I'm here to help. The child's ears were pointed and could move like all Vareth ears. They twitched with pain and confusion. Human medic, she whispered in accented standard language. Human medic who treats everyone the same, Marcus said. He was already reaching for his surgical kit. What's your name? Nara. Nara Fenn. She winced as Marcus began setting up the portable machine that would stabilize her body functions. Are you going to hurt me? I'm going to stop the bleeding and make sure your organs stay where they should be, Marcus replied. He gave her a shot of pain medicine that was made to work on Vareth bodies. The hurting part is already done. Now we focus on healing. He had learned early in his time here that Vareth children responded better to honest explanations than fake promises. Their species had evolved in a place where survival depended on understanding danger correctly, not on thinking everything would be fine. The stabilizing machine hummed as it started mapping her internal injuries. Its holographic display showed damage that would have killed her without immediate help. This is going to feel strange, Marcus warned. He turned on the cellular repair field. Your body will start fixing itself faster than normal. Some people say it tickles. Nara's laugh was weak but real. Humans have strange ideas about medical treatment. We have strange ideas about most things. It's part of our charm. The repair field was working, but slowly. Vareth biology needed careful adjustment to avoid triggering immune responses that could be worse than the original injuries. Marcus watched the readings while keeping up a steady conversation designed to keep his patient awake and calm. Nara, I need you to stay awake for me. Can you tell me what happened here? War singer Kayla came for the weapons, she said. Her voice was getting stronger as the pain medicine worked. The soldiers ran away, but the building fell on me when the explosives went off. Marcus nodded, continuing his work while remembering the information that Varith forces had been targeting military supplies rather than medical buildings. War singer Kayla was a name he'd heard in casualty reports. She was a Varith commander whose smart tactics were matched only by her reputation for showing no mercy to human forces. "Are your parents here on Kepler's Edge?" he asked. He adjusted the repair field as internal bleeding stopped and organ function began getting better. "My parents are with the ancestors," Nara replied with the matter-of-fact tone children used when discussing tragedies they had learned to accept. "War singer Kayla is my clan leader now." Before Marcus could respond, he heard the distinctive hum of an active plasma blade behind him. Then came a voice that carried the kind of authority that made smart people stop moving and listen very carefully. "Step away from the child, human." Marcus continued watching Nara's vital signs. His hand stayed steady despite the weapon he could feel pointed at his back. "She has internal bleeding and possible organ damage. I need another 10 minutes to make her condition stable." "I said step away. And I said she needs medical attention." Marcus finally turned, still kneeling beside his patient, to face a Varith warrior who matched every terrifying story he'd heard about their military abilities. She was tall even by Varith standards. Her silver-streaked hair was tied in complex braids that showed high rank. Her armor showed the kind of wear that came from actual combat rather than ceremony duties. The plasma blade in her hand glowed with deadly energy. Its edge wavered slightly in a way that suggested she was deciding whether to kill him quickly or question him first. "You are doing experiments," she accused. Her accent was heavier than Nara's, but her standard galactic was precise. "Using our wounded for human medical research." "I'm treating her injuries," Marcus replied calmly. He pointed to the stabilizer's display. "Look at the readings if you don't believe me. Her cellular repair rate is increasing, blood pressure is getting stable, and organ function is returning to normal levels." The Varith warrior, who could only be war singer Kayla herself, moved closer. Her blade stayed steady, but her eyes scanned the medical equipment with clear knowledge of how it worked. Why would a human risk his life to save Varith children? "Because she's a child and she's hurt, and I'm a medic. The politics don't matter." Something flickered across Kayla's features. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a philosophy she hadn't expected from an enemy. "You show no fear." "I'm terrified," Marcus admitted. "But being scared doesn't change the fact that this kid will die if I stop working on her." Kayla studied him for a long moment. Her blade didn't waver, but her expression shifted from aggression to something more complex. "Continue your treatment, but if you cause her harm, you'll kill me painfully and probably feed my remains to something unpleasant," Marcus finished. "I understand the terms." He turned back to Nara, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes. "How are you feeling? Any dizziness or nausea?" "Better," she said softly. "The pain is almost gone." The stabilizer's readings confirmed successful treatment. Internal bleeding had stopped, organ function was restored, cellular damage was repaired to the point where natural healing could complete the recovery. Marcus began packing his equipment, aware that Kayla was watching his every movement with the intensity of someone evaluating threats and opportunities equally. "Treatment complete," he announced, helping Nara sit up slowly. "She'll need rest and regular nutrition, but she should make a full recovery." "You have saved her life," Kayla said. There was something in her voice that hadn't been there before. A weight of obligation and confusion that suggested she wasn't sure how to process a human showing genuine compassion for Vareth casualties. Marcus stood, putting his medical kit on his shoulder while trying not to make any sudden movements that might be seen as aggressive. "It's what I do." "Why?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond medical ethics. Marcus considered his answer carefully, aware that his next words might determine whether he left this conversation alive. "Because every life matters," he said simply. "Human, Vareth, whatever other species we encounter out here. Pain is pain, suffering is suffering, and if I can reduce either one, then that's what I'm going to do." Kayla's blade wavered slightly, and Marcus caught a glimpse of something in her expression that looked almost like recognition. Then his medical sleeve caught on a piece of twisted debris as he adjusted his kit. The fabric tore from wrist to elbow and exposed the skin beneath. The plasma blade stopped moving entirely. Marcus looked down at his exposed forearm where glowing patterns traced intricate spirals from wrist to elbow. The colors shifted from blue to silver to deep purple depending on the angle of observation. The tattoo pulsed gently with his heartbeat. Its organic curves formed symbols that were beautiful, alien, and unmistakably Vareth in origin. When he looked back up, Kayla's weapon was trembling in her grip. Her face was pale with shock and something that might have been hope fighting against disbelief. "Where?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of battle. "Did you get that, Mark?" Marcus felt his carefully maintained neutrality crumble as 15 years of hidden history threatened to spill out in the space between them. The mark on his arm pulsed brighter, responding to emotions he'd spent years learning to suppress. In that moment, he knew that his secret was about to change everything. "It's a long story," he said quietly. Kayla's blade clattered to the ground as her hands began to shake. "Tell me." The abandoned medical storage room where Kayla had taken him felt like neutral territory. If neutral territory could exist in the middle of an active war zone between two species who had forgotten how to coexist. Marcus sat on an overturned supply crate while Kayla paced the small space like a caged predator. Her movements were sharp with barely contained energy and confusion. 15 years, she said for the third time, as if repetition could make the timeline make sense. "You have carried a soul bond mark for 15 years. "Apparently so," Marcus replied, rolling up his sleeve to expose the full extent of the glowing tattoo. In the dim emergency lighting, the patterns seemed to pulse with their own internal rhythm, responding to his elevated heart rate and the closeness of the woman who was staring at them with an expression caught between wonder and disbelief. "Do you understand what this means?" Kayla demanded. "Do you have any understanding of what was done to you?" "I know it saved someone's life," Marcus said carefully. "Beyond that, I was never given much explanation. The medical team said it was an experimental procedure. That the patient needed immune system support that only a compatible donor could provide." Compatible donor. Kayla's laugh was sharp and bitter. "They told you it was medical compatibility, didn't they?" She stopped pacing and fixed him with a stare that seemed to look through him to something he couldn't see. "Soul bonding is not a medical procedure, Marcus Kane. It is a sacred ritual reserved for bonds that transcend death itself. Mates, clan siblings, parent and child in mortal danger. It links two beings across space and time through empathic resonance." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his understanding of the past 15 years. Empathic resonance. You share emotions, memories, physical sensations with your bonded. The connection grows stronger with closeness and emotional intensity. Kayla moved closer, studying the patterns on his arm with professional interest. "Have you experienced unexplained pain?" Dreams that felt like memories of places you have never been? Moments of rage or sorrow that seemed to come from nowhere? The accuracy of her description made Marcus's stomach clench with recognition. How did you know that? Because I have experienced the same symptoms. She pulled back her own sleeve, revealing an identical pattern of glowing markings that covered her forearm in mirror image to his own. For 15 years, I have felt phantom pain in my left shoulder, precisely where you were wounded during the Centauri Station incident. I have dreamed of human faces and human voices speaking languages I was never taught. I have felt compassion for enemies during battle, emotions that made no sense for a Varith warrior. Marcus stared at the matching marks, his medical training warring with the impossibility of what she was suggesting. You're saying we're soul bonded to each other. I am saying that 15 years ago, a dying Varith child was given a choice between death and spiritual connection to the human medic who had shown her kindness when her own people could not save her. Kayla's voice carried the weight of memory and pain. I am saying that child chose connection and has spent every day since wondering if her savior survived the bond that preserved her life. The room went quiet except for the distant sounds of ongoing combat and the subtle hum of emergency power systems. Marcus studied Kayla's face, looking for traces of the child he had treated during the plague outbreak on Harmony Point Station. A desperate girl dying from a virus that human medicine could cure, but Varith biology couldn't process. Nara Thalen-Ka, he said slowly, remembering the name she'd given him before the soul-bonding ritual that had been explained to him only as an experimental treatment requiring informed consent and absolute confidentiality. I took the warrior name Kayla when I reached maturity, she confirmed. But yes, I was the child you saved when human doctors said the immune system incompatibility made treatment impossible. The ritual, Marcus said, pieces of memory clicking into place. They said it would create a temporary biological link to support your immune response. They never mentioned permanent marking or empathic connection because they were human doctors who understood the medical aspects but not the spiritual implications. Kayla sat across from him, her posture shifting from warrior alertness to something more vulnerable. Soul bonding requires consent from both parties. But consent can be given through action rather than words. When you agreed to the procedure, you unknowingly accepted a bond that Varith law considers more binding than marriage. Marcus rubbed his temples, trying to process information that recontextualized 15 years of his life. So when I've been having those dreams about Varith culture, experiencing emotions that didn't make sense, you were experiencing my memories, my feelings, as I have been experiencing yours. Kayla's expression was complex, carrying years of confusion and isolation. Do you know what it is like to be a Varith warrior who suddenly feels human compassion for wounded enemies? To find yourself hesitating in combat because you experience their pain as if it were your own? Is that why you've been avoiding direct engagement with medical personnel? Marcus asked, remembering intelligence reports about Kayla's tactical patterns. Every raid you've led has specifically bypassed field hospitals and medical transports. Her ears flattened against her skull, a Varith expression of shame. I could not attack healers without feeling their fear and dedication as if they were my own emotions. My warriors think I show mercy from strategic calculation. They do not know their war singer is compromised by soul bond to the enemy. The implications hit Marcus like a physical impact. Kayla, if your people discovered the bond, I would be stripped of rank and exiled as spiritually contaminated by human influence. Soul bonds are considered sacred connections that cannot be broken except by death. She met his eyes directly. If human forces discovered it, court-martial for treason followed by execution or life imprisonment. Marcus felt the walls of possibility closing around them. We're both walking security risks. Worse than that. We are living evidence that deep connection between our species is possible, which makes us threats to those who profit from continued warfare. Before Marcus could respond, his communication unit buzzed with an emergency priority signal. The display showed an incoming transmission from Colonel Sarah Harrison, his commanding officer and the human military governor of the Kepler's Edge colony. Kane, respond immediately. We have intelligence suggesting Verith forces have captured or eliminated our medical personnel in the Haven's Rest sector. What's your status? Marcus looked at Kayla, who had gone completely still at the mention of military intelligence. If I don't respond, they'll assume I'm dead or captured. If I do respond, they will ask questions about what I have seen, who I have encountered. Kayla's hand moved unconsciously toward her weapon. And I cannot allow military intelligence about my forces to reach human command, even if it means killing my soul bonded. The question hung between them like a blade. Kayla's expression cycled through conflict, duty, and something that might have been desperation. Marcus, she said finally, there is something you must understand about the current situation. The raid on Haven's Rest was not random targeting of military assets. What do you mean? Human forces are planning a final offensive to eliminate Verith resistance permanently. We captured communications indicating mass deployment of atmospheric processors designed to make Kepler's Edge uninhabitable for my people. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Atmospheric modification that would affect civilians, children, anyone who couldn't evacuate in time. Exactly. My raids have been desperate attempts to capture or destroy the equipment before it can be deployed. Kayla leaned forward, her voice urgent. The weapons we targeted today were not conventional military hardware. They were terraforming systems modified for biological warfare. Marcus stopped, his medical oath warring with military loyalty as he realized the implications. That's a war crime. Deliberate targeting of civilian populations through environmental modification violates every treaty we've signed. Yes, but it would end the rebellion permanently, which some of your leaders consider an acceptable cost. The communication unit buzzed again, more insistently. Colonel Harrison's voice carried the edge of impatience and growing suspicion. Kane, I need immediate confirmation of your status and intelligence on enemy positions in your sector. Respond now or we're assuming hostile contact. Marcus looked at Kayla, then at the soul bond mark that connected them across species lines and political loyalties. For 15 years, he'd carried a connection he didn't understand to someone he'd never expected to meet again. Now that connection was forcing him to choose between military duty and moral obligation, between the safety of his own species and the prevention of genocide. What do you need me to do? He asked quietly. Kayla's expression shifted from surprise to something that might have been gratitude. Help me stop the atmospheric processors from being deployed. Help me save both our peoples from a war crime that will poison any chance of peace for generations. And if I'm caught helping you, then we die together as soul-bonded should. She extended her hand, palm up, revealing the pulsing glowing patterns that matched his own. But perhaps we can find a way to live together instead. Marcus reached out and clasped her hand, feeling the strange warmth that flowed between their matching marks. The moment their skin touched, he experienced a flood of emotions and memories that weren't his own. Fear, determination, years of loneliness, and underneath it all, a desperate hope that peace might still be possible. Colonel Harrison, he said into his communication unit, not breaking eye contact with Kayla. This is Kane. I'm alive and uninjured, but I've discovered something you need to know about the atmospheric processors. Something that changes everything. the makeshift command post that Kayla's warriors had established in the abandoned mining facility buzzed with the kind of controlled tension that preceded either brilliant victories or spectacular disasters. Marcus sat in the corner trying to blend into the background while Varith's soldiers eyed him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely contained hostility. "Explain to me again," growled Thurinkiel, Kayla's second-in-command, "why we are trusting human intelligence about atmospheric processors when humans are the ones deploying them." Kayla studied the holographic tactical display that showed human military positions across the Haven's rest sector. "Because the intelligence comes from someone with access to human medical files and engineering specifications. Someone who understands both the technical capabilities and biological effects of modified terraforming equipment. Someone who could be feeding us false information to protect human strategic advantages," Thurin countered, his scarred ears twitching with agitation. "Warsinger, this human appeared conveniently during our raid, claims to have saved Varith lives, and now provides information that supports his own survival. The pattern suggests deception." Marcus felt the soul bond carry Kayla's frustration and conflict, emotions that mixed with his own growing certainty that honesty might be the only path forward. "He's not wrong to be suspicious," he said, addressing Thurin directly. "If I were in his position, I'd assume the same thing." "Then why should we trust you?" demanded Lyric Stormauler, a young warrior whose family had died in human bombing raids. "What proof do you offer of your sincerity?" Marcus rolled up his sleeve, exposing the soul bond mark that pulsed with glowing patterns. "This proof. 15 years of connection to someone I met as a dying child who I saved because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected political advantage." The room went completely silent. Several warriors took involuntary steps backward, their expressions shifting from hostility to something approaching awe. "Soul bond," whispered Lyric. "Warsinger, you carry soul bond to human." Kayla raised her own sleeve, revealing the matching patterns that mirrored Marcus's markings. "I carry soul bond to the medic who preserved my life when our own healers could not. The connection is sacred and cannot be broken by political considerations." Thurin's expression cycled through shock, understanding, and strategic calculation. "This changes the tactical situation significantly. If human forces discover the bond, they will consider both of us compromised by enemy influence," Marcus confirmed. "Which is why we need to resolve this crisis quickly before either side has time to turn our connection into a liability." "Resolve how?" Thurin demanded. "Human atmospheric processors are deployed across 3 sectors. Even if your intelligence is accurate, we lack the resources to destroy them all before activation." Marcus activated his portable medical scanner, projecting biological synthesis readings into the holographic display. "We don't need to destroy them. We need to modify them." "Explain." Atmospheric processors work by introducing engineered organisms that alter environmental composition. The modifications to make them weapons involve targeting respiratory systems specific to Varith biology. Marcus highlighted key technical specifications. "But if we can access the central control systems, we can reprogram the organisms to target different biological markers." Kayla leaned forward, studying the data with obvious military interest. "Target what biological markers?" "Stress hormones associated with aggressive behavior, combat stimulants, neurochemical signatures that indicate violent intent." Marcus expanded the display to show neurological pathways. "Instead of killing Varith civilians, we could create an atmospheric environment that naturally reduces hostility and promotes cooperative behavior in both species." The room erupted in surprised voices as warriors debated the implications of using human weapons to enforce peace rather than commit genocide. "Biochemical pacification," Thurin said slowly. You suggest turning their genocide weapon into a mind control system. I suggest turning it into an environmental therapy system that makes violence psychologically difficult while leaving cognitive function otherwise unimpaired. Marcus met the skeptical gaze. Think of it as atmospheric medication for species-wide PTSD. And you believe this is possible? I believe it's possible if we work together. Verith biotechnology combined with human engineering, implemented by people who understand both systems. Before anyone could respond, proximity alarms began wailing throughout the facility. A scout burst into the command post with news that made everyone's tactical calculations irrelevant. War Singer. Human forces approach in full assault formation. Armor, air support, heavy weapons. Estimated arrival 20 minutes. Kayla's expression hardened into battle readiness. Defensive positions. Prepare for. Wait, Marcus interrupted, his soul bond connection picking up emotional undertones from Kayla that she wasn't expressing verbally. This isn't a random assault. You're feeling something specific about this attack. Human forces never commit full resources unless they intend complete elimination of targets, Kayla replied tersely. This is extermination assault, not tactical engagement. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach as he realized the implications. They're planning to activate the atmospheric processors during the battle. Use the chaos to mask the deployment, then claim Verith casualties were combat losses rather than chemical weapons victims. How can you know this? Because it's exactly what I would do if I wanted to commit genocide while maintaining plausible deniability. Marcus grabbed his medical kit, his mind racing through possibilities. Kayla, we need to evacuate your people and get to the central processor facility immediately. Evacuation is not Verith way, Thurin protested. We stand and fight. Against atmospheric weapons that will kill everyone in the sector regardless of combat outcome? Marcus turned to face the assembled warriors. This isn't about military victory anymore. This is about preventing war crimes that will poison human-Verith relations for generations. Kayla studied the tactical display, her expression cycling through military calculation and something deeper. Through their bond, Marcus felt her experiencing his memories of treating war victims, his understanding of how violence created cycles of revenge that destroyed entire civilizations. New plan, she announced with the authority that had made her a war singer. Combat withdrawal to Sector 7. Thurin, take 2/3 of our forces and establish defensive positions at the mining complex. Make it appear we are regrouping for counterattack. And the remaining forces? Will accompany me and the human medic to the atmospheric processing facility. We prevent genocide first, fight war second. Baron's ears flattened with obvious disapproval. War singer, this is tactically unsound. Dividing forces in face of superior enemy reduces our combat effectiveness. Maintaining our combat effectiveness is irrelevant if atmospheric weapons eliminate our entire civilian population, Kayla replied sharply. Some objectives transcend military tactical doctrine. Marcus felt the soul bond carry her determination and fear in equal measure. Determination to protect her people. Fear that she was making decisions based on emotions rather than strategy. Kayla, he said quietly, if we're wrong about this, if the atmospheric processors aren't configured for biological warfare, then we will have wasted resources on humanitarian concerns rather than military ones. I can accept that outcome. She looked around the command post at warriors who had followed her through 3 years of brutal conflict. Can you accept the alternative? Can any of you live with allowing genocide to proceed because we prioritize tactical advantage over moral obligation? The silence that followed carried the weight of decisions that would define not just the battle ahead but the character of everyone involved in making them. Lyric Stormwaller, whose family had died in human attacks, stepped forward first. "I volunteer for the processing facility mission." "As do I," added another warrior, then another, until half the assembled forces had committed to a mission that offered minimal military advantage and maximum personal risk. Thurin watched his Warsinger's support base solidify around a decision he clearly considered strategically insane. "This soul bond has changed you," he said finally. "You think like human now, prioritizing individual lives over strategic objectives." "No," Kayla replied, checking her weapons with practiced efficiency. "The soul bond has taught me to think like both human and Vareth simultaneously, to see war from the perspective of those who suffer from it rather than those who profit from it." Marcus felt her emotions through their connection, not just determination and fear, but a deep sense of responsibility that went beyond military duty to something approaching moral clarity. 10 minutes to departure, Kayla announced. "Gather equipment for atmospheric system infiltration. We move fast, we move quiet, and we stop a genocide." As the warriors prepared for a mission that violated every principle of conventional warfare, Marcus realized that his accidental soul bond had done more than connect him to an individual Vareth. It had connected him to the possibility that enemies could become allies when they shared common values more fundamental than species loyalty. The atmospheric processing facility waited in the distance, its towers rising like mechanical monuments to humanity's ambition to reshape entire worlds. Soon, those towers would either deploy death across the landscape or become instruments of an unprecedented peace. Marcus checked his medical scanner one final time, hoping that 15 years of hidden connection would prove strong enough to bridge the gap between genocide and cooperation. Through the soul bond, he felt Kayla's matching hope, tempered by the warrior's knowledge that the most important battles were often won or lost by the narrowest of margins. "Ready?" she asked, her hand briefly touching the glowing mark that bound them together across species lines. "Ready," Marcus replied, feeling the weight of history settling on their shoulders as they prepared to prove that some connections transcended the politics of war. The facility's proximity alarms began their ominous countdown in the distance, marking time until atmospheric modification would begin. Whether that modification brought death or healing would depend on two soul-bonded individuals who had chosen cooperation over conflict, even when the choice defied every logical tactical consideration. 20 minutes until human forces arrived. 15 minutes until atmospheric deployment began. And somewhere between those deadlines, the future of two civilizations would be decided by people who had learned that the strongest bonds were forged not in battle, but in the shared commitment to protect life above all other considerations. The atmospheric processing facility's central control room had been designed by engineers who'd apparently never considered the possibility that someone might need to reprogram genocide weapons while under active military assault. Marcus crouched behind a control console, his medical scanner interfacing with atmospheric modification systems through connections that definitely violated several safety protocols and possibly the laws of physics. "Status report," Kayla called from her position at the facility's main entrance, where she and 3 Vareth warriors were holding off human security forces with the kind of desperate efficiency that came from knowing that failure meant the death of everyone they'd sworn to protect. "I've accessed the primary biological synthesis controls," Marcus replied, his fingers flying across interfaces that combined human technology with hastily integrated Vareth biosystems. "The good news is that my theory was correct. The atmospheric processors have been modified to target Vareth respiratory systems specifically." "And the bad news?" "The bad news is that whoever designed these modifications was very, very good at their job. The targeting algorithms are sophisticated enough to distinguish between human and Vareth biology at the cellular level." An explosion rocked the facility as human forces breached the outer perimeter. Through the soul bond, Marcus felt Kayla's spike of adrenaline and tactical calculation as she repositioned her warriors to buy him more time. "How long do you need?" she asked, her plasma rifle adding its distinctive whine to the growing symphony of combat. 20 minutes to completely reprogram the biological synthesis parameters. 5 minutes to implement the pacification modifications I discussed earlier. Marcus paused, studying readings that made his stomach clench. "But there's a problem with the pacification approach." "What kind of problem?" "The kind where reducing aggressive behavior in both species might leave everyone too peaceful to resist if someone decides to continue the genocide through conventional weapons." Marcus pulled up atmospheric dispersal patterns, calculating coverage areas and concentration levels. "We need a solution that stops the immediate biological warfare threat without creating a different kind of vulnerability." Another explosion, closer this time. Through the facility's security cameras, Marcus could see human forces advancing with the systematic precision of troops following explicit orders to leave no survivors. "Marcus," Kayla said, her voice carrying the weight of command decisions made under impossible pressure. "I am receiving communications from my forces at the mining complex. Human atmospheric deployment has begun in Sector 5. My people are already dying." The words hit him like a physical impact. Marcus looked at his scanner readings, at the atmospheric modification systems that hummed with lethal potential, at the timer showing 3 minutes until facility-wide deployment would begin. "New plan," he announced, his hands moving across control interfaces with the kind of desperate precision that came from having no good options and very little time. "Instead of modifying the atmospheric processors to target different biological markers, I'm going to modify them to target the weapons themselves." "Explain quickly." "The biological synthesis organisms are designed to interact with respiratory systems, but they're also capable of more complex chemical interactions." Marcus began rerouting system parameters, watching as his modifications propagated through the facility's network. "I'm programming them to break down the chemical compounds used in military explosives, energy weapon power cells, and atmospheric modification systems." "You are creating organisms that will disable weapons." "I'm creating organisms that will make warfare itself biochemically impossible within the affected area. No explosives, no energy weapons, no military technology beyond basic mechanical devices." Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead as countdown timers approached 0. "It won't stop people from fighting, but it will force them to fight with their hands instead of weapons that can commit genocide." Kayla's laugh was sharp with desperate humor. "Enforced primitive combat. Both sides reduced to equal footing." "Exactly. No technological advantages, no weapons of mass destruction, just people deciding whether their differences are worth settling with their fists." The facility's main doors buckled under sustained assault. Human voices shouted tactical coordinates, growing closer with each passing second. "Implementation in 60 seconds, Marcus announced, his medical scanner showing green confirmations across all atmospheric modification systems. "But there's one more thing you need to know." "Tell me." "The weapon-neutralizing organisms will affect all military technology in the area, including Verith energy weapons and human combat gear. Once this deploys, everyone fights on equal terms or they don't fight at all." Through the soul bond, Marcus felt Kayla weighing options that would determine the fate of 2 civilizations. Her warriors were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy that had already begun deploying biological weapons against civilian populations. The atmospheric modification offered a chance to level the playing field, but at the cost of eliminating the technological advantages that had kept Verith forces competitive. "Do it," she said finally. "Deploy the modifications." Marcus activated the system-wide implementation, watching as biological synthesis organisms began flooding the atmosphere through dispersal networks that spanned 3 sectors. On his scanner, the readings showed successful deployment, rapid propagation, and immediate effects on military equipment throughout the area. The shooting stopped. Not gradually, but immediately, as energy weapons powered down and explosive devices became chemically inert. The silence that followed was more profound than any cessation of hostilities Marcus had experienced during 2 years of war. Status report from all units, Kayla called into her communication system. The responses came back in confused, frustrated voices. Warsinger, weapons are non-functional. Energy cells show no power. Explosive charges are not responding to detonation commands. Similar reports crackled through human communication channels that Marcus could monitor through the facility systems. Command, this is Alpha Team. All equipment has gone dark. Repeat, all weapons and electronics are non-functional. Colonel Harrison's voice cut through the communication chaos with barely controlled fury. All units report status of atmospheric processors immediately. Sir, atmospheric systems show green across all boards, but the effects are not as anticipated. No casualties reported, but all military equipment is showing complete system failure. Marcus stood slowly from behind the control console, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender as the facility's main doors finally gave way to human forces equipped with nothing more dangerous than emergency medical kits and basic tools. Colonel Harrison, he called out as armored figures entered the control room. I'm Medical Officer Marcus Kane, and I need to report a critical modification to the atmospheric deployment systems. Colonel Harrison emerged from behind her escort, her expression cycling through confusion, anger, and growing understanding as she took in the scene. A human medic standing beside sophisticated atmospheric controls, 3 Verith warriors who had lowered their now useless weapons, and readings that showed successful deployment of atmospheric modification across the entire sector. Explain, she ordered, her voice carrying the dangerous calm of someone deciding whether to order summary execution or listen to impossible explanations. The atmospheric processors have been reprogrammed to neutralize weapons technology rather than target biological systems, Marcus replied. The biological warfare deployment has been converted into a zone of enforced nonviolence. By whose authority? Marcus felt the soul bond carry Kayla's steady courage as she stepped forward. By my authority as someone who refuses to allow genocide to proceed in my name, and with the assistance of someone who shares that commitment. Colonel Harrison's gaze moved between them, clearly trying to process how a human medical officer and a Verith warsinger had ended up cooperating to sabotage their respective military operations. You've committed treason, she told Marcus flatly. I've prevented war crimes, he replied, and created conditions where this conflict can be resolved through negotiation rather than extermination. And you, Harrison addressed Kayla directly, have allowed military assets to be compromised. I have prevented my people from being murdered by weapons designed to target civilian populations, Kayla answered, and created conditions where both our peoples can choose cooperation over mutual destruction. The standoff stretched for long seconds. Human and Verith forces facing each other with useless weapons in an atmosphere that had been fundamentally altered to prevent the kind of violence that had defined their conflict. Colonel, Marcus said quietly, may I suggest that we have an opportunity here that won't exist again? 3 sectors where warfare is biochemically impossible, communication systems that still function, and 2 peoples who have just demonstrated that they can work together when survival requires it. You're suggesting negotiation. I'm suggesting that we've created the perfect environment for it. No weapons, no technological advantages, just people talking about how to share a planet that's big enough for both species if they can find ways to cooperate instead of compete. Colonel Harrison studied the atmospheric readings, the disabled weapons, and the mixed group of human and Verith personnel who had somehow managed to prevent a genocide while violating every protocol in their respective military codes. Dr. Santos, she called to someone in her communication system. I need immediate consultation with our xenobiological specialists. We have a situation that requires expertise in interspecies diplomacy. As the facility filled with the organized chaos of improvised peace negotiations, Marcus felt the soul bond carry emotions from Kayla that matched his own. Exhaustion, relief, and something that might have been hope for a future that neither of them had believed possible an hour earlier. 5 years later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of Serenity Falls Medical Station, watching supply ships arrive with patients from across the sector. Human and Verith refugees, war victims, and increasingly, families who had chosen to build lives together in the neutral zone that had grown around the atmospheric modification sites. Status report, Kayla said, joining him at the viewport with the easy familiarity of someone who had become both professional partner and life companion. 32 patients in recovery, 18 new arrivals scheduled for tomorrow, and 3 successful cross-species medical procedures completed this week. Marcus smiled, watching a group of human and Verith children playing together in the station's garden domes. Also, I received confirmation that the atmospheric modification technology is being implemented on 6 new worlds as a peacekeeping measure. And our personal status? Marcus touched the soul bond mark on his arm, now openly displayed rather than hidden beneath medical sleeves. Still connected, still arguing about proper medical protocols, still proving that the most important bonds are the ones that help us become better than we thought possible. Kayla's laugh was musical with contentment. Still saving lives and preventing wars through superior atmospheric engineering. Still saving lives, Marcus confirmed. Though I'm hoping the war prevention becomes a more routine part of the job description. Through the viewport, the stars stretched out toward horizons where former enemies had learned to build futures together, one carefully negotiated piece at a time. The soul bond that had begun as a desperate medical procedure had become something unprecedented, proof that connection could transcend species, politics, and the historical momentum of violence. Marcus Kane had started as a medic who treated wounded soldiers. He had become something the galaxy desperately needed, evidence that healing was stronger than harm, and that sometimes the most profound changes began with someone choosing to help rather than hurt, regardless of the political consequences. The mark on his arm pulsed gently with shared contentment, carrying emotions that belonged to both of them and to the future they were building together, one patient at a time. Through the viewport, the stars stretched out toward horizons where former enemies had learned to build futures together, one carefully negotiated piece at a time. The soul bond that had begun as a desperate medical procedure had become something unprecedented, proof that connection could transcend species, politics, and the historical momentum of violence. Marcus Kane had started as a medic who treated wounded soldiers. He had become something the galaxy desperately needed, evidence that healing was stronger than harm, and that sometimes the most profound changes began with someone choosing to help rather than hurt, regardless of the political consequences. The mark on his arm pulsed gently with shared contentment, carrying emotions that belonged to both of them and to the future they were building together, one patient at a time.